Great. So welcome everyone to the latest episode of How to Build, our webinar series where we dig into some of the most pressing questions and pitfalls that we encounter every day in talking with you, our dear customers out there in the world of content management and web development. So I am very excited for today because one of our core fundamental tenets at Builder is that we only aim to build what our customers need, what our customers use, and what our customers ask for, right? And this feature we're going to be talking about today is probably the most requested, most asked about, most highly anticipated feature request to date. So it's been something almost a year in the making. Of course, I'm talking about our newest enterprise feature, environments. Environments in the world of web development is nothing new, right? But within Builder, environments is a new feature set, a new way that you can easily and seamlessly sync your content across your various pre- and post-production spaces, streamline your development workflows, as well as content creation and release cycles. So I can't emphasize this enough. This was a huge feature set, a huge problem we were working to solve, and one we are very, very excited to get in the hands of our customers and start getting more feedback on, right? My name is Tim Garibaldi. I lead the customer solutions team here at Builder, and I work with a lot of our largest customers. And so I like to think I have a pulse on what it is our customers are talking about, right? I'm really excited to be joined here today by the man behind environments himself, one of our most prolific product architects, the head of product development international here at Builder. Of course, I'm talking about Shyam. Shyam, how's it going?
I'm doing great, Tim. Super excited to be here. Like I said, it's fun to make amazing things, and it's even more fun to get it in our hands of customers and see them use it and love it and give us feedback. So
absolutely, and this is definitely an amazing thing. So I'm excited to get going and talk about it.
Let's roll.
Yeah, so here's an agenda for the next 30, 45 minutes. We already had our welcome. In a second, we're going to go through the topic of the day, all things environments. We'll spend a few minutes talking about what the problem is, why it's such a pain, how we recognized it as an issue at Builder, and what we've been doing to try to solve it, or at least alleviate some of these issues, right? So we'll go over some of the previous techniques we recommended around pre and post production environments, and some of the techniques we still recommend to our non-enterprise customers. And then Shyam himself is going to go through a demo of this new enterprise-only feature environments, right? Breaking down the ways that you can streamline your pre- and post-production workflows. And then, of course, we will save some time for question and answer at the end. There is a chat. Please feel free to send your questions there. We'll have some time at the end to try to answer anything that comes up. Sound good? All right, let's get started. So without further ado, the topic of the day, environments. So listen, in a perfect world, right, developers would be able to write code and develop on their local machine and then push those code changes directly to production without any issues. Content creators would be editing content directly on prod or even in code, right? Without the need for any checks, validations, or oversight. But we know that is not the case. We know that we do not live in a perfect world, unfortunately. And in most modern websites, they've embraced a multi-environment paradigm, which means you have multiple distinct apps set up to test code, content, general user experience. Developers can build features in their local machines, push it to a pre-production environment, and then see how their code reacts with the rest of the app, with the content, how things look, and test on as close to a one-to-one experience as possible, right? But now, more environments, of course, means more upkeep, more process, a little more maintenance. And then one of the big issues that people have been asking us about is like, how does my modern CMS, my modern experience manager fit into all of this, right? If you only have one space in Builder and you're pushing that to prod and dev, what if you need to test something? What if something breaks? What if you have a new product or a new component that you're trying to test? You don't want to push that to production without being certain it's going to work. You don't want to test old content on new code or new code on old content or anything like that, right? and then your whole website goes down, bad news. So we know there's so many variables in modern web app development that pushing to production without testing is, as they say, living dangerously. So we've known this since the beginning here at Builder, and this has always been an issue that we've been trying to tackle and we've been thinking a lot about. So for years, we've already had a number of solutions, and we're going to walk through some of those in a minute, from using custom fields. We have a complex admin API that you can use to write scripts, or even sometimes we recommend just having multiple models in the same space for each environment, right? All of these options work. They continue to work. There's something that we continue to recommend to our growth level customers. But for our enterprise customers, there's a new and much better way. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here. So this update has been a long time coming. Our entire product team has been involved. We've researched what workflows work for us, what workflows work for other companies, what workflows don't work, what our customers are using, what they wish they could use, all of that. And we're really excited to show that off today. So where did we start, though? Let's maybe start there, right? What were our first options? Originally, the option we recommended the most is what we're calling our custom fields option, right? And this is still available and still recommended use for our non-enterprise customers. Essentially, what you're doing is on all of your models, you are defining this environment input that has some enum values that correspond to your pre-production environments, right? So prod, QA, staging, whatever makes sense for your setup. And then within your code, you just have to pass that as a query to our API, our builder.get, our builder component, our render component, and make sure that you're getting the right content for the right environment app that you are in, right? Production code or content for your prod environment, QA content for QA environment, et cetera, right? Pretty straightforward. The biggest drawback here, though, is, of course, it's not really syncing the content. You're going to have different content entries for different environments, or you would be, having to promote from QA to dev to production, and then you don't have that same content across all of them. There's some manual stuff or some drawbacks about syncing content. Not the worst, definitely a working solution, but we thought we could do better, right? So then we came out with our admin API and our admin SDK. This is another great option. This is a code-based solution where you're able to really sync your models, sync your content between your spaces by writing scripts that fully automates the process. So again, the solution might not fit everyone because it's fairly technical, but it has a lot of functionality that's super useful. You just have to write the scripts, set up these workflows manually within our admin API, within our SDK, and have someone who's available to manage this, right? Usually it requires a little bit of dev resources, which we all know dev resources are very much in high demand and always something we're trying to minimize here at Builder. That is kind of our mission at Builder, right? Once it's set up, it works great. Setup and maintenance requires these dev resources. Again, we thought we could do better. We wanted a solution that was easy to use, out of the box, didn't require too much dev setup, had syncing, had everything, didn't require a manual setup. And that's kind of where we landed, right? So now that's kind of how we started. Shyam, I am so eager to hear, I'd love to hear, when you joined Builder and you started thinking about environments, how did y'all think about it? How did the whole process start? And, how did we get to where we are today with this new feature that's coming out?
No, absolutely right. I think it's very interesting. It's kind of day in and day out as a developer, because like you said, while we would love to live life dangerously and just write code on our production servers,
Why not?
I think the rest of the company probably might not like that as much.
Right.
I mean, we're perfect, but hey,
right.
There are days. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where we started. And as we looked through all these solutions, we said, so the use case was clear, right? That we do want separation. We do want separation of concerns. We want to be sure that we are in control of what we're doing. And that's kind of where we naturally gravitated. I mean, conceptually, it makes sense because You have something different for your dev, something different for staging, something different for production, and it's kind of the entire model you want to replicate. So conceptually, it made sense, but then the question was, what do we do within Builder to enable that, right? And a lot of it is fundamentally learnings from what our customers did, what our customers have used, what has worked for them. We did spend a lot of time talking with the different sets of customers just to make sure we did understand the ask, and we were not going off and building some random thing that we thought was cool and amazing that we would like to show.
Right.
So we pretty much co-developed it with a lot of our core customers who would be using these on a day in, day out basis, right?
Amazing.
And so before we talk about what we ended up developing, it's also kind of, I feel it's important to share how we thought about it and what were some of the core principles we thought as we went about developing it, right? And I think what came out as we saw the existing solutions within Builder and some of the things that were there out in the market is we wanted to make it as simple as possible, right?
Absolutely.
It should not be complex. It should be easy to use. I mean, everybody says that, and that's kind of what we want to do, right? Environments, the entire process should be simple button clicks, not complex workflows. It should not be apparent that something complex is happening underneath.
Right. When
So
you show a big script of a bunch of code, people, especially non-technical
copy paste
people,
this and run this, and
yeah,
maybe it'll work. No,
right.
None of that, right? Simple UX should work. Things should be as apparent as possible, right? And so that was number one.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, as we started thinking about this and building this, was we started with the concept which most developers are comfortable with, which is Git branches, right? I mean, that's the next thing that kind of makes sense. You have branches of development that kind of makes sense. So you might have a dev branch, a staging branch, a production branch, and that sort of makes sense. But it wasn't completely the right method because branches get out of sync.
Yeah.
And especially with websites and content, being in sync was critical. Right?
Absolutely.
Because your production website would keep changing, you would keep updating it. And so if it became the responsibility of somebody to make sure, hey, when did I last update my branch? When was it last synced? Were there changes made afterwards? All these are questions we don't want our customers to think about and worry about, right? So the second thing we wanted to accomplish was make sure your environments are as much as possible in sync with your production. Right? So you have a replica of what's there for your customer's production website in every environment. Except, and that's the last part, which is we don't want surprises for customers. We're dealing with our customers' data, it's there on production. Under no condition should a customer ever be surprised by something they did. And so the sync is fundamentally one way. You go from production to your environments, but never automatically sync the other way back. So we sync down. Going from a lower environment back to production is always a manual step that the user has to take. So we put the user in control once we give them the latest data. And again, we'll show some of these off in the demo. But once you have the data in your lower environments, it's the user's decision whether it's in sync, not in sync, whether they move it up, move it down. All of that is manual steps that the user takes. So those were some of the major principles that we want to keep in mind so that customers are never surprised, but are always pleasantly surprised by how easy it works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I mean, talking about Git branch, hell, I'm like having PTSD from being a developer. Like that we want to avoid that for sure.
Oh, yes. Rebases and remerges are painful.
Yeah. Not easy to use.
Never. But hey, what can you do? So speaking of what can you do, let's talk about what can you do with environments.
Right.
So the obvious win, of course, is you can create environments, you can create stages, you can set up your production pipeline the way you would want it, right? Create your dev, create your QA, create your staging, canaries. I mean, however you process you want, create those stages, separate out your steps. Each of these underneath the covers is actually a space, right? So an environment in Builder is actually a space. So every environment you create is a replica of the original space, but has its own API key. So switching between spaces in your code is actually just switching between API keys. Everything else should just work the way it is. So from an implementation and integration perspective, it's pretty trivial. You just change the API key, which usually is just an environment variable, and you're pointing from dev to staging to production. It's seamless. So that's the more obvious common use case we've, of course, seen a lot of customers use. Some other interesting use case also, we've seen some customers being creative with how they set up are things like we have partners who want to create demos that they show off to their customers. And so having a common demo space and then an environment spun off for each team member who would demo, who can then get the whole replica of the demo, but tweak it as and when they want for a specific customer, for a specific use case. If it's interesting enough, push it back so that it's common and available to all the other team members, or just turn it off, dump it, move on to the next one, get the latest replica again, right? So very, very interesting use case. We had not thought of that, but the way it's implemented, it nicely extends to such use cases. The third one, which is closer to my heart as a developer, is, again, Builder, you can create complex models, you can do some crazy integrations, you might want to upgrade some major component library that you're using in your website, whatever framework you might be using. And so spinning off an environment as a test bed, saying, all right, things are in production, let me spin up something, try these things out on a completely local environment, which has everything from production available, but I can make my changes, test things out, and either decide it looks good, move it up to a dev environment, production, depending on how your workflow is, or abandoning it and realizing it was not a good use of time. But having the ability to just bubble wrap your local environment, get everything. I mean, as a developer, getting a replica of production to be able to test against is a dream come true, right? And that's something we've seen customers do it, and it's amazing to see that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I was just on a call with a customer last week, and they're upgrading their entire component library, including custom components within Builder, and they were worried about, if they push this component library up, is it going to break all their content? And I said, hopefully not. Maybe. Tune into environments. We'll have a solution that can help you with that. I mean, it's amazing to see the use cases that customers are coming up with, for sure.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, we've heard a lot about it. I would love to see it.
Absolutely. Let's make it happen. Let's go. All right. So let me figure out how to share my screen next.
I might need to stop sharing. There we go.
That would help. All right, almost clicked the wrong button because Zoom UX moved underneath me. Right. And is my screen visible?
Yes, we can see.
All right, sweet. So what do we have here? So I have a pretty prototypical space in Builder. Has a bunch of models, bunch of different kinds of page models, section models, some data models created, entries, content entries created for each type of model. It's simple in the sense that it's just like 10, 20 entries. Customers, of course, have much more complex setups, but it does cover some of the typical use cases of different kinds of content, linkages between content. All of that is kind of captured in this demo space, right? And so it's an enterprise space that I do have. Nothing new. I mean, you have a home page. I can show off some of the content, pretty trivial for the most part, but so that it's easily, you have a home page, you have a secondary page, so on and so forth. Now, what's new? So we go to account settings, and you should start seeing, as an enterprise customer, an environments tab. And what this shows is the list of the main space that you have, which is your production space usually, along with its API key that you would have probably already integrated with, and a list of other environments that are created, right? I already have one for staging, shows when it was synced, last sync status, and let's go ahead and create another one, right? Let's maybe create a dev environment. And so creating a new environment is as simple as clicking a button, giving it a name, and clicking create environment. Now, this does a few things. This internally starts a sync, which does, let's say, the Git branching approach, which is, all right, let's create a replica of what is there on your production. So copy all over the models, copy all the content, make sure it's not, there are some tweaks that we have to do, but all of that happens. For a significantly large space with lots of content, maybe it could take a few minutes for the initial sync to kick in, but this is happening in the background. For a small space, usually trivial enough, completes pretty fast, right? You're talking in the order of minutes at most, not hours, in most cases that we've seen. So that's step one. Once you go into that environment, it's pretty much the same, right? The same UX, UI you're used to, everything is the same, except now for a new thing, which is that you'll see a column called linked. And so this is the second part of what we did with environments, which is how do you keep it in sync? You do the initial copy, but after that, any changes that are happening in production should flow down, right? So if you go in right now, this is a replica of what I have on my home page. All great. Switching between environments also is pretty simple. You have a nice breadcrumb. Once you have multiple things, you can easily see which ones are here and switch between them.
I love that feature.
It's when you're working across.
Game changer, yeah.
Game changer. All right, let's say this is a home page, make some changes. Somebody publishes an update. Nobody needs to go tell all the environments that some changes are happening. Once you go to that one, those changes are replicated automatically linked, right? Could take a few minutes if there's a lot of load, but generally we've seen this pretty close to being instant. So linked, updated all the time. Now, what does linked mean? Linked means we as builder are keeping your environment in link at each content and also at the model level. So even models are linked. So the same approach for content applies to models. So you can make progressive changes to both your models as well as your content objects. So that's definitely one part of it. When things are linked, we don't allow you to edit it because we want to make sure it's getting the latest copy. You to making changes will anyway just get blown away when changes are happening. Not a great experiences.
No surprises.
No surprises. Exactly. Right. At some point, you decide in one of your environments, you want to start making changes. So at that point, again, a manual action by a user saying, turn off live sync. I am taking over, stop doing that work. At this point, changes in your main space stop flowing to this continuity. All the other things still kept in sync, but things that are unlinked stop receiving changes anymore. So at that point, you could make changes, do something, whatever. Great. You might decide from here, then you have the option of pushing the content forward to different stages, staging, or even to production. And the other option is you decide these changes need to be discarded, in which case you can just turn on live sync.
Pulls that content back down.
Exactly.
And updates.
And now it's back linked.
Amazing.
Of course, sometimes you do want to make those changes. So let's go ahead and make a change. So we turn off live sync. And this is my updated homepage. Again, these changes can be as complex as you want it, keeping it simple for the purpose of the demo. Make your changes, you test it, you can go test it on your website. You have an API key, you could be testing it in the builder editor, you could test it separately, run your end-to-end tests against it, whatever you need to do, right? And at some point you decide, looks good enough, let's move it forward. Let's move it ahead to staging. And so at that point, again, a manual action by a user taking a calculated decision, showing where it's going, where it's coming from. You can even view a diff. Right now, it's a JSON diff. We're working on a visual diff here. And finally, at some point, I say, this looks good enough to move it forward. So I push it, still remains unlinked because there are changes I've made. It's different from my production.
Oh, I see. Because you're in another lower environment, not pushed to prod yet.
Right. And now staging also is unlinked. Previously, it was linked. It now has received changes. So it's also in an unlinked stage. Excuse me. So this is my updated homepage, still getting the new changes that I've been pushing over. I can
Mhm.
make changes further here, have it even differ, which ideally you want to keep a workflow. So let's now
Mhm.
do that. You can blow away the lights thing. So the same options exist everywhere. And at some point you decide you've got it done. Good. You can see the difference again, what's on production versus what's here, and decide, all right, move it up. Let's go to production. Now, this moves your entire content over from my particular environment up to production. And notice when I push into environments keeps it unlinked, but the minute it goes to production, we know, all right, production is up to date. This is a copy of production, link it back. So now it started receiving changes again.
Mhm. Amazing.
Now let's go see our production space at this point, right? And this same workflow applies for different content, it applies for your model objects. You could do the same thing. And you get your
There you
update, right?
go.
So you have a nice workflow. You've got bam, 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 got your
Mhm.
update, all seamless, pretty much close to instant. And you have it nicely separated. These are different spaces. You are not, you don't mess it up.
Yeah. Amazing.
So that's one part of it. So that's the workflow itself. The other part of it, excuse me, is how do I control, right? So keep it in sync, no surprises. The no surprises also, as we talk to our enterprise customers, is we realize it's not just the content sync and content push, but it's also who does it, who can
Right.
do it, who can take what actions, right? So roles and
Permissions.
access permissions became super important as we realized, as we started talking to customers, that this is just the actual flow and logic is one part of it, but actually being able to control who can do what things was also just as important. And so as part of environments, we have improved and upgraded our roles to allow for more fine-grained permissions around this, right? So what you could do, right? Okay, I'm on the
Are you in the
namespace.
prod? Yeah.
I'm on the prod space. So of course, there are no environment-related permissions. But let's say we go to dev. So at an environment level, you now have permissions to allow environment level permissions, right? And this is at an environment level. So you
Mhm.
could create custom rules for different environments, allowing different things. And fundamentally, you can gatekeep two things: who can link and unlink stuff,
Mhm.
and who can push stuff. And pushing, you can even do fine-grained push control, saying, all right, this role only allows you to push from dev to staging, but not to production. And so you can set it up so that you can never push from your dev directly to production, but you have to go from dev to staging, staging to
Right.
production, and get that entire workflow set
Whatever
up.
your workflow is. Yeah.
Exactly, right? You can fine-grain control it. So that's one part of who can control. The other part of it is that if a user who does not have permissions makes the changes and is at a point where they need to push it, but do not have permission because of how the roles are set up, we have a request to publish a flow.
Mhm.
So we allow the user to kind of tag the admins who have access to push
Mhm.
from the content editor directly. The publish button becomes a request, the push becomes a request,
Yep.
and we send out a notification to the admin saying, hey, this content is ready to be migrated from, say, dev to staging or staging to production. And so you can create these workflows in a pretty seamless manner just through using these roles and options.
Amazing. Yeah. So it's like you said, it's the no surprises, everything easy to use, all within the UI of the editor or of builder. Yeah. Amazing. Very cool.
So a lot more there, but again, just scratching the surface is what you can do with this. And again, super happy to get it in the hands of users to really try this out and tell us how it works for
Yeah.
them.
For sure. No, absolutely. I guess my one question is, I know you kind of touched on this. So that your demo is a pretty simple setup, but this works for huge enterprise setups, right? Like,
Absolutely.
is there a limit? I mean, I think we've seen thousands and thousands of content entry environments that are constantly in sync, right? Like, is there,
Absolutely.
yeah, it was designed to scale.
It is designed to scale, right? So the larger, so we've had customers with over close to tens of thousands of content entries. Might slow down your initial sync, but once the sync is done, keeping it in sync and all that is pretty seamless, pretty fast, happens pretty much on the fly all the time.
Amazing.
So yeah, so we talked about live sync. Like I mentioned, we didn't demo it for models, but the same approach works. We keep models in sync, we keep contents in sync. You can update the models, you can update the contents. We also ensure that you push the model first before you push the relevant content. So all those checks and balances, which can lead you to kind of crazy scenarios, we kind of handhold through the UI and our flows. Of course, we saw how you make changes, you can keep pushing it forward, you can relink and discard your changes. Roles and permissions, again, super critical. Access control, who can do it. We do have audit logs and activity logs of what's been happening at a different space and environment level as well. So that's all there right now, ready to be used. As our customers have started using it, we have been asked about bulk actions, because you start making changes, you have a large number of changes, you want to move multiple things together. And so that's definitely next on our roadmap of being able to move a bunch of content together from one environment to the other, working through the UX of how some of that will be easy. Again, we want to make sure there are no surprises when you do things like that. So that's why it's not been part of our initial release, but definitely a fast follow-up. And again, the visual diff, right? JSON, while you understand what is changing, we do understand these are pages for the most part. So having a visual diff of really being able to visualize what has changed from one environment to the other is super critical. And so that's also something that we are actively working on.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, and then, like you said, we want to get this in the hands of our customers. So as we get feedback from customers, we're very eager to continue developing new features, new functionality. I think this is going to be something that our enterprise customers are going to be using and really stretching to the limit and finding all these new use cases. And so we're really excited to continue to develop it along with our customers. So cool. Awesome. That was amazing. Super informative and really, really cool to see. Thank you so much for that, Shyam. We have some more resources available. Pretty much everything that we demoed here today, we have documented in our documentation. We also have documentation around our admin API, our admin SDK, the custom fields method that we touched on earlier, which again are still really great options for non-enterprise customers. So definitely recommend taking a look at that. And then, of course, if you're already a customer, reach out to us. Let us know if you're interested in environments. If you have any other questions, if you want to dive into it a little bit more, we're always happy to do that. And then we, of course, have our demo request link here, which you can also find on our main website. And so we'd love to hear from you and look forward to seeing what people can do with environments for sure. Cool. So now questions. Let me see. Let me open up the chat. Okay. First question, where is this recording going to get posted? So this will be posted to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Our previous webinars are already posted there. Definitely check it out. Hopefully we'll get this up here in just a few days. We had a question related to request to publish. Is there an option where the reviewer can send the content back to the initial author who has sent the request with his or her comments? Definitely. I mean, we have the ability to comment on any content entry. So yeah, you can tag users in a comment. It'll automatically notify them of the comment, and then they can come back in. Basically, you would just not publish it and come back and respond to their comments. Yeah, Shyam, any other
No, I was going to say comments is the best way. So if you haven't noticed, there's a small tab in the content editor. You can comment, you can tag users. So go ahead, do that. And the cycle, you can just ask them to request to publish once they're done with the changes. So absolutely, you hit it on the nail.
For sure. Okay, how about after publishing to main production, is there a way to roll back?
Great question, right? So what we do is as and when you push something from one stage to another stage or from your environment to your production, we do create a checkpoint in that content. so that if something does go wrong in that particular use case, you can go back to your history and roll it back to what it was.
Yeah. So yeah, just the standard history, revert, publish again.
Absolutely. So we just leveraged that, added a checkpoint so that you have an entry just before the push happened.
Yeah. Gustavo asked, is there a way to know when a user posts or pushes something in production? Yeah, so in our history tab, which Shyam already mentioned, we differentiate between just general history, every update is constantly logged, as well as checkpoints. So if you click what command S, it'll save, and then publishes. So anytime someone publishes, we have a log of those publishes and who published it. In terms of setting up alerts, that's definitely possible. I would say you could use a webhook to submit an alert through your system that way. Would probably be my best recommendation. Shyam, anything else I missed there?
No, I think that's there. And again, you could set up webhooks and all that. Yeah.
Let's see. Does this tie into Jamstack services like Vercel, Netlify, Cloudflare Pages, etc.? Absolutely. This will tie into any application setup as long as, if you have multiple environments, you would just, like Shyam said, there's each environment in Builder has its own distinct API key. And so as long as you have it set to, point to the right API key for the right environment, it'll go into any, tech stack that you have, especially Jamstack, which we're fans of. Cool. Let's see. Some other ones we have. I'm seeing Builder previews completely differently than another user of the same preview within the Builder platform. That might be something we can investigate. I would recommend reaching out to our support team. There might be something related to your preview or your browser or caching. We can definitely check that out for you. Let's see. Is there a live support team that I can reach immediately? We do have, a dedicated frontline support team that is always available. support@builder.io, or if you have there's a little widget at the bottom of the screen. I think it's for our growth customers but yeah, we do have absolutely that are constantly monitoring incoming issues. So would recommend reaching out there. So we have another question not related to environments about caching. Again, recommend reaching out to our support team. Happy to look into that. We do utilize some caching and have documentation on how you can bust cache in your API calls. So check that out. And I think that is it. Let's see, some new questions coming in. Continuous integration, it's basically continuous integrations with stages and environments. Yep. What happens if a change is pushed from dev to staging, if staging is also not linked and already has changes in the same blocks or pages? Are the changes on staging overwritten, or can they be merged in the diff viewer?
I can take a stab at that. So right now, we don't have the merge flow, but the change itself would be visible and obvious when you do a diff before you push. So that's our way of handling it. We didn't want to block it because there were use cases where customers like, yeah, but I do want to override it. So it is allowed to do. The merge is something we've had a few customers ask. We're just trying to figure out how to make it as simple as possible, because merging HTML content can get tricky. And so that's something we are actively exploring right now.
Okay. Great. Another question about request to publish, where the email, is it possible to email if there's a request to publish and someone does not review it, is there a way that I think, so the question I believe is like, can we re-trigger it or reinitiate that request to publish?
I believe so. I mean, so you could come back and do a request to publish again. You
Yeah.
could also use commenting as a way to tag someone and notify them, or tag someone else in case the original person is not responding. That said, request to publish is actually going to all the admins, so it's not going to one person. So hopefully the odds of that happening are lower.
Yeah.
But yes, there are options available.
Cool. And then we have another question. Can we have content which can be created common for multiple spaces? So we don't have syncing across spaces necessarily. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Shyam, but we do not have, so no syncing between spaces. We do have the ability to copy any content manually. If you go in the top right corner, click the 3 dots, you can copy to another space, or you can set up the admin API, which will also allow you to copy some content, or even just using our query API and our write API, you can kind of manually sync content using scripting between spaces. But yeah, currently this syncing feature is within environments inside a single space. Cool. And then does Builder support multi-site management? Yes, we have multiple spaces, multiple organizations. You can have any kind of, Builder was designed to be flexible across all kinds of, enterprises, businesses, content stack, or tech stack. So if you have questions, of course, we'd love to dive deeper. Please reach out and let us know. Cool. Well, we are actually coming up almost exactly on the 45-minute mark. And multi-site has to be maintained via different spaces. There's different setups you can do. We've had people who have setups where they have one space, but generally we recommend the separation of multiple spaces. But again, if you have questions or want to kind of dig into your exact setup, we'd love to talk to you for those kind of personal setups. So great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shyam. This has been amazing. I love this feature, and the customers I've talked to love it too. We're so excited to get it in the hands of even more customers. So yeah, please, everyone, reach out, test it out. Let us know what you think. We'd love any feedback. We'd love to receive any feedback on this. And we appreciate everyone taking the time to come here. Again, like I said, we will be posting this webinar on YouTube. And we would also invite you to join us next time. We are going to have our next webinar where we're going to be going over all things localization. We have tons of options to localize content within Builder. And we are really excited to deep dive into a lot of that with you next time here. So thanks everyone for coming. Thank you so much, Shyam, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good day, bro.
See ya.